Okay, welcome everybody to the second info session for the Fall 2024 residency program cohort. VSG, the Viterbi Startup Garage, is an incubator for USC Viterbi, which is the engineering school. And I host these info sessions for a variety of reasons. Number one, to kind of like stop answering frequently asked questions that come through my inbox and get a little bit ahead of questions that teams might have about being a part of the garage. And number two, to open up a forum for real discussion and questions about what the garage is, what it does, who it does it for, whether you're a good fit. So it's kind of like an attempt to kill many birds with one stone. And it also is nice to just engage with you all and to be aware of who's currently in the startup ecosystem interested in incubators and things like that. So I will pause along the way as I go through this presentation so that you can ask questions. I really like it if you ask your questions out loud, partially because I've been encouraging you all to use the chat as a networking function. And so it's kind of like I'd have to scroll through it to see your questions. So if you have a question, use the hand raise function, say your question out loud. You don't have to turn your video on. I'd love it if you turned your video on, but that's okay if you don't. But please try to say your questions out loud. Otherwise, I'll probably save your question until the end when I scroll through it and get to it. But let's get started. Okay, so what is going to be covered today? I kind of mentioned it already. Programs, resources, community. It's basically what we do, how, like what we're going to offer you through those programs, and then how we engage in the general community, and how, in case you're not a perfect fit for the garage, how you can continue to gain value and access to what it is that we do. I'll just move really quick so you can see all of that. Yeah, so this is just like, I don't know, basic agenda. So first and major question that gets asked is, what is the startup garage? Why is it different? What's our value proposition, right? Against other incubator and accelerator programs. And a lot of people don't realize this or believe it. It's true. We're a completely free resource. This means that if you get into the garage, you get all of the benefits that the garage offers you free of charge. There's no hidden fees. We don't take equity, and we're not trying to take or own it in any way. So keep that in mind. Amongst other programs, that's pretty unique. So who do we accept and how do we decide? Okay, so I'm just going to run through these things. It's important for you to pay attention because this is the type of stuff that I think I get asked the most. And I think it's because there used to be startup garage iterations before my time that did different things for different people. So this is what the startup garage has been for at least 5 years. This is what we're doing now. So full-time founders, which it means that you're not currently a student. And we say no solo founders. There's a caveat to that. Sometimes you become a solo founder while you're at the garage. If you're a solo founder, you can apply, but you have to make a great case for yourself to be able to handle that type of responsibility only on your shoulders. And you probably should have something baked into your roadmap, getting more support, more team members, maybe a co-founder, maybe a lead in one of the departments. But we don't like to see people doing it alone because we know how challenging it is to do even with a co-founder. If you are a student and you have a co-founder that is full-time, that's also great. If you're a solo founder and you're a student, that's a hard sell. If you're a co-founding team and you're both students, that's less of a hard sell, but it is still really difficult for us to feel confident that you have the time to commit to your startup, and you won't have to, kind of be super distracted by your other responsibilities. I kind of like how this guy looks like he's like we're best friends. LA based. Okay, so the next two are together in that we want you to use the garage as your main office for business, at least 3 days a week, which basically means that you are in LA. I mean, you can't come into the office if you're not in LA. And then we make a caveat for co-founders where maybe one founder is somewhere else for strategic reasons. That's okay with us. So post-ideation basically means you aren't just like, oh, I have a great idea and I'd like to build it at the Viterbi Startup Garage. That's too early for us. We want to know that you know that there's a customer out there that you're building for. So customer discovery needs to be already done. And you can be prototyping and pre-launch, but you have to be pretty much ready to launch, meaning like you validated your product in the market and you are currently working on your go-to-market strategy. That's about as early as we'll take you. Tech-enabled products and services. Okay, this is just basically means if tech isn't at the core of your product, and I actually just had a call with a team right before this meeting, and he's in the material sciences. And so he technically is an engineer. He's structural. That still is technical, meaning like, you know, if you're like a hardware company and you have IP that is basically falls within engineering, it could be chemical engineering, it could be in the material sciences. But what we aren't going to take is like consumer product goods that just don't have any technology in it. So like if you have you know, like a fiber company and you're building and you're selling fiber supplements, that's not going to work. So there has to be some level of technical IP to your product for you to be a good fit for the garage. Yanni, I see your question. I'm going to get to it in just a second. So here's some to dispel some concepts. Your initial technology needs to be already in development or outsourced. We aren't, the Viterbi Startup Garage, although we're totally connected and supported by the engineering school and all of the benefits of that, meaning faculty, students, you name it, we aren't here to provide you those resources to get your business going. Those should be supplemental to what you already have in your company, whether it's in-house or outsourced. You should already be working on that technology. So if you're like a business person, a business student, or a founder who's totally a business person, and you don't have your tech lead or your technical co-founder, and so you haven't really started building your technology, don't come to us to help you with that. You can come to me personally by sending me a message on LinkedIn and say, hey, I need help finding somebody. I could do that on the side, but that's not for that. That would be like a first step to prepare you to be part of the garage. Industry agnostic, we don't care what industry you're in. We like actually a good mix of industry founders because you learn a lot from each other. Plus, like, there's probably some really great use cases that you can kind of learn from. So industry agnostic, early stage. So you're either planning to raise external funding or have raised some external funding. So pre-seed to Series A, that's our sweet spot. This is a big one. USC affiliation is preferred, but not required. If you never went to USC, if you're not USC faculty, if you've never even heard of USC, that would be crazy, but like that is not a requirement. You just have to be an LA-based tech startup to be qualified to participate. If you're part of like Caltech or UCLA, we're not discriminating against technology that's been built in other universities. What we want to do is be a part of your story and support you to get from point A to point B, whatever that success is. We're here to help. And then people who want to work and play at the garage. Okay, so the garage is in Silicon Beach. The office is beautiful. It looks out into the marina. It takes a certain type of person to want to engage in a shared co-working space. If you're a nervous person who doesn't like people looking at them while they work, or doesn't like to engage in conversations, or I don't know, just like is not interested in co-working space, the garage is probably not a good place for you. We intend to build like a family style community of teams while they're with us for that year. So we really do want a cultural fit as well. How do we decide? So we do 2 recruiting cycles a year, one in the spring and one in the fall. This one is for the fall, and you stay with us for a whole year. You submit an application, we review it, and then we do Zoom interviews for any qualified candidate that we think might be a good fit. And then we make decisions, and we take only 5 to 6 teams per cycle. And the last thing that I'll mention is if you don't get in when you apply, please apply in the next 6 months, especially if you've like made a great deal of traction against your goals from that first application, because that gives us an opportunity to see how you really get things done when you say you're going to do them. Okay, Yanni, what's your question?
Hi, Arcelia. Thanks for making the time of setting this up. So I just graduated from the Marshall MBA program, so I'm on the business side, working on this full time. So I have a contractor who was building the technology for me, a software dev joined that, and building the MVP. So, but I own, 100% equity of the business. So I guess you'd say I'm a solo founder, but I have like the tech help building it. So just want to see how I fit into that equation.
I mean, I think that fits in this kind of initial tech already developed. You probably at some point want to get someone invested in the technology in-house, right? That's a normal evolution. We can help with that. That's 100% the case. I think like that threshold from not having any real technical support and not sourcing it yourself and validating that basically developing the technology, that's too early. But it sounds like you're further along than that. The fact that you're a solo founder might be a tough sell, but then what you have to do is really help us feel confident in your application that in the time that you're going to be with us, how you're going to meet all of your benchmark goals. And that might include identifying and bringing in a technical lead to support you. But if you think that like you don't need the help and you can do it on your own, consider that a general red flag, because no one can build an entire business by themselves, especially if they want to get funding. Like, I think it's hard enough. So like you should always be thinking about how you're going to grow your team. You don't want to jump off that cliff quickly, but like at least that is our stance, is that, if you really want to grow the business, that means getting people invested in the business the way that you are. So don't hesitate to apply.
Understood. Okay, so this which is on the roadmap, right? For me to find that technical founder, this is kind of a bridge for me to get through the MVP. But just to confirm, it sounds like I'd still be eligible to apply, correct?
Yeah, totally. Especially if it makes sense, right? Like maybe there is in your product roadmap, maybe what you have built from this contractor, third-party contractor, enough to go to market. It's enough to run a beta. It's enough to start getting initial customers. It's your MVP. Your MVP. If your MVP is done, your MVP is done. Now, once you start to get some traction and you start to scale, exactly, it's harder. It becomes harder and harder to manage customers when you are dealing with a third-party vendor, and that just that's a pain point for many startups. And so that's when you start to consider bringing in another person. You kind of having the wherewithal to know where that tech additional support internal in-house, where that is in your product roadmap, only helps us better understand that you know what you're doing, which is huge, because a lot of what we're doing is vetting you as founders who have the wherewithal to understand how to build a business. We'll help you in some ways, but you can't you can't be clueless in that way. Mike,
thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Michael.
Hi, can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for setting up this whole meeting. It's like been really informative, first off. Secondly, I just had a couple quick questions about the requirements. So first thing, I'm currently a USC student in the MSCS program, but also I have uh if I were to get funding, I would probably go part-time at USC. I have a co-founder who's a professor,
Yeah,
who's a USC alum.
yeah.
Would that be an issue when applying?
I would say no. So like, I know I just said pretty heavily that like solo founders, full-time founders. What does that mean for you, for any of you on this call? It means that if you fall outside of any of these parameters, some of them are hard stops. If you're not in LA, how are you going to fake that? You can't. But there is a finesse to understanding how you're going to prioritize your business against your other responsibilities. So what you need to do is make that clear to us in your application. Assume that we're going to say, oh crap, they're not full-time, or oh, X. Take this information and assume that any of these things are potential points against you. So then work to mitigate some of those points by letting us know how you understand why we make it a limit, but you have thought about it and you have a workaround for that, right? Then that puts us back into a place where, okay, well, now we're back in a discussion mode because we are being convinced that that it is a hard thing to do, but you already have plans to handle it, right? So don't overlook these things. Don't assume that they aren't going to be points against you. If you don't fit all of this criteria, then make sure in your application you're addressing it in a way that would make somebody feel confident again.
Okay, got it. Perfect. And then the second question I had was about the LA thing. I'm based out of Orange County, but I commute to LA like 2 to 3 times a week. Would that problem, or would I need to actually physically live in LA County?
What county are you
Orange County.
in? Okay. I mean, that's not close, right? And this is up to you, really. We want to see you 3+ days in the office, but access to the garage, which is something I'll talk about a little later, is 24/7. So if you wanted to come outside of traffic hours, and that's like not 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, we don't care. We just want to see you in the space. For my purposes, I want to see you during the meetings that matter to me. So like, again, this is going to be later in this presentation. I'll talk about some of the programs. One of them is Founder Circle. I want to see the founders at the garage at Founder Circle. It's an in-person meeting. There's no virtual option. So like, that's one of the days, right? And that happens on Thursday. And I'm always happy to negotiate what days those happen if it's like a hard stop for people. But yeah, I mean, I guess like you have to question your own abilities at that point, because our expectation is 3+ days. And we are starting to incorporate a 6-month check-in because like I said, every 6 months we're bringing in teams. And if in 6 months you haven't been coming into the space, we're going to reevaluate your residency and potentially remove you to make space for somebody who will use the space, right? So just keep all of that in mind.
Okay, but it's not a hard stop entirely, if I can explain like how I'm going to come into the office and stuff like that, right?
Exactly. So like I said,
Okay.
if you can find a way to help us to like believe that you will be in 3+ days or 3 days minimum, because you've worked it out with your schedule and you're like, well, I'll be, in town this day, whatever that is. I'm not telling you what to say. I'm just saying whatever it is that you're going to do in your life to make sure you are in the space, make that clear in your application, because it will be asked. If you make it to, especially if you make it to the interview round, it's a question that Dave Eastman, the director, asks every team every time. Are you going to come into the space? And it's because we've been burned a lot by teams who say they're going to come and then they don't come. And that's a huge drag on our community, which is why we're bringing in this 6-month evaluation. But like, just keep that in mind. Basically, I don't want to like, drag this into the ground, this kind of discussion about being in person. But just, this is a residency program for people to come in and be with each other and work with each other. And we want you to have your team, we want to see, the engagement of a business in the space, not just like attendance, so just keep that in mind. Brianna.
Thank you.
Ooh, Monsivice is my like mother's maiden name.
Oh, wow. Wait, that's crazy. That's not a very like common name.
I agree.
Yeah, but okay, so hi, I'm Brianna. I do have a question. So I kind of jumped in, I just got out of class, but I think I was catching the end of what you were saying about like if you have applied previously and then basically wanting to see like what progress you've made since the last like time you applied. And then also explaining like why, because we're currently like my company is like we're at like a hold right now because we're waiting for our incorporation, and we've like already sent those files out and we've been going back and forth with them. And so it's kind of stalling like the rest of our like progress because we have like our development and we have all of this. So where in the application would be like a good spot to explain like what we're currently going through or like why we're like at a stall?
There are some long form answer questions about your funding, your business, and your team. So pick your moments. So like think about the way we evaluate you in a few big buckets. One of them is just you as a person, as a founder, your team, right? We want to know that you have what it takes, and that can look like a lot of different things. It could be that you are like a serial founder and you've done it before. That's probably the easiest way, right? They've done it before. Or you have the right skill set within you because you're working in an industry that you already know very well, or you are your own customer. That's a good one. With those two aside, let's say it's just like a space you've never been in, then it's who is on your team. Do you have an advisory board? Do you have people around you to basically help you to better understand how to break into a market or how to build that technology or whatever? So it's either you've had experience, you as a founder, you live in that world, or you have the right team around you. So that's like team or person. Then there's product. So your product needs to be realistic and be in a space that isn't so busy that you aren't going to get eaten alive. And also, you have to have the right people developing that product. It has to be somewhere along. And the technology kind of matters. We want to know that we are supporting real technology. So like, that's kind of more of a technical space. And then there's the business. The business is broken down into a few different things, but basically it's understanding where you are in your funding and how you're mapping your business in your like models for going to market, for revenue, for pricing, for entering that market, and for getting customers. So those are kind of the big categories. So you would probably try to find the one that makes the most sense to clear up any of the concerns that we might have, that you're anticipating that we might have, right?
Got it.
Yeah. It stinks to be waiting on things and it kind of like bottlenecks the rest of your operations. But we also don't want, I mean, and I don't think this is what you're doing, but like, let me just make it explicitly clear that like you don't want to sound like you're making excuses, right? Like that's a huge thing because that devalues you as a founder. You should always be finding strategic ways to work around your barriers because, oh my God, let me tell you, there are so many barriers for founders. So like, you know, coming in and not necessarily, it's okay to complain, but save your complaints for when you're in the garage and at founder circle. In your application, keep it like super strategic.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, I'm gonna move it along to what do we do and what don't we do? Okay, I mean, this is kind of already talked about. So we give you office space. Oh, why am I looking over there? We give you office space, which is like all this really great space. We provide resources through our programming, and we really help your business kind of take it to whatever the next level is by connecting you to our network connections, investor relationships, and also some technical resources through the university, through our student programs and stuff like that. We also really encourage you to engage in our community because let me tell you, there's nothing more valuable than your founder friends, because you guys are on a social emotional journey that really stinks, and having people around you who are also on that same journey, to give you advice, to pick you up when you've hit the ground, or to celebrate the little wins or the big wins, that's huge. So these are all things that we do. What we don't do is kind of what I mentioned. We don't take equity, and we don't provide technical resources, machinery, or development. That means we don't have lab space. We are working on having better partnerships, but there just aren't really great labs in the area. So all of our partnerships like send you really far out. So like, for instance, for fabrication space, wet labs, whatever that is, like our relationships are weak because they aren't local. But we do have some. So it's not like we can't point you in the right direction. And we do have some, like, maybe, I don't know, discounts for that stuff. But we don't do it technically. It's not part of what we do. Okay, programs. And I'm gonna just like bam, 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 because a lot of this is on our website. Founder Circle is like, what is it? Group therapy for founders. We come together. It basically is positioned around OKRs, which are objectives and key results. So on a quarterly basis, I'm having founders submit their OKRs, and it's usually like broken down into objectives for like, for funding, for product, for marketing, and maybe for team. And you won't always have goals every quarter in all of those buckets, but like basically we want to know, like, what are you doing in the next 3 months? And then what your key results are like, how do you break that big objective down into measurable results? And then we're going to track them. So every founder circle, we eat lunch together, and we just see what you've been up to and make sure that you're tracking towards your goals. But we also just open it up for a forum for sharing and asking for help to each other. So like, for instance, let's say one of your goals is about marketing and you're having trouble with some element of your digital marketing strategy. You can ask the rest of the group, like, what do you use for XYZ? And then like everyone will weigh in. So it's very valuable. The Oceanside Chat is a public facing program. You do not have to be part of the garage to join our Oceanside Chats. It's virtual. It's basically specialists that come in and talk about their skills, and they help to basically support anyone interested in the startup ecosystem and landscape, and being a startup founder, to better understand maybe skill sets that you don't have already. We are building out our Q4 Oceanside Chat series now. So regardless of whether you get into the garage or not, you can log into those. They're super valuable. Plus, our Oceanside Chat library of past Oceanside Chats recorded are available, and you guys can look into them. They're keyword searchable, so you can just jump on the library and like look up something, and then it'll show you all the videos that talk about it. Legal clinics are an internal resource just for teams. On a bi-monthly basis, we bring in Kevin DeBray from Stubbs Alderton, and we have lunch with him. And in preparation for that bi-monthly meeting, the teams kind of will submit general legal questions, and then he will talk about them high level, because he's not allowed to give legal advice. However, he is allowed to talk about questions in a general way, which is really helpful for the teams, because it's kind of like secretly getting, not secretly, it's like, it is getting advice, but in a very general, not direct. It's not direct advice, and it's great. And he's also happy to speak with you one-on-one, to have more of a private conversation in case you do want to have more of a private conversation. VC Angel office hours, we're actually preparing for one at the end of this week. This is where we bring our investor friends to look at your decks and to basically give you unfiltered feedback on all of the problems with your deck or your pitch, because the likelihood of you getting any of that feedback while you're actually fundraising is low. You'll get a lot of no's, but not a lot of reasons why. So VC Angel office hours is bringing in investors to basically tell you what's wrong. And so it's pretty valuable. Teams sometimes like it, teams sometimes really don't like it. So you have to come in with a thick skin. The idea of it is to kind of like punch you in the gut a bit, so that you can go back and maybe make adjustments to your deck. The ISI Tech Exchange is, so we're like in the same building as the Information Sciences Institute, and some of you may not know it. It's a research institute for USC Viterbi. They have literally every type of technological innovation being in-house being researched, from like quantum computing. We just, with the CHIPS Act, we have this new, there's just like every and then AI, of course, every form of technological advancement is being researched, especially in the computer science world, is being researched at ISI. And so we try to engage with them as often as we can, because they're thinking about technology far beyond how we are applying it in the business world. So it gives you kind of insights into, when you're building out your technology, like what you should be thinking about. And you can also just ask them for feedback and support on technical challenges that you have in your current product. And then Summer Smasher, which is arguably one of the best programs that we offer. It is an 8-week summer program where we bring students from the university to come do projects for our teams. So from the experience on the team side, it's just like a completely free resource for work, like for support. It is as valuable as you want it to be, because it's not mandatory, and you can run as many projects as you like, as you can handle with your bandwidth. Last year, it grows every year. Last year, we had nearly 500 applicants and 200 students participated. It's pretty outrageous how valuable the program has become. And I think it's just because we have cool teams doing cool stuff, and we have students who are really interested in being part of the startup world. A lot of them are master's and engineering students, but we also get students from other schools, like business school, the Keck School of Medicine, Price, Annenberg. We get other students interested, depending on the types of projects, obviously. Okay, before I move on from programs, does anyone have any questions about programs?
I had a quick question. For the Founder Circle, sorry if I missed this. What days do we meet for that?
It used to be Friday. It's currently Thursday. Like I said, I'm totally open to shifting it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's over lunch. So anytime I force you all to do something as teams, I try to do it over lunch. Partially because it's nice to feed you, but also it's like most people are taking breaks during that time, right? It's like a totally typical work break time in our country. So it's a good time to pull away from your business.
Awesome. And then the other question, 2 other questions on the ISI exchange. So what's the relationship like? Like, can we just are they pretty open, just kind of schedule like office hours with them, or is it more structured? Like, just how does that work?
So I'm going to be perfectly honest. The program is ad hoc, meaning like as needed by the teams. So if I'm not getting, and the way my threshold is like 3 teams to pull off a tech exchange. So 3 teams need to say, I want to do a tech exchange. And then I say to the teams, okay, put a quick deck together of your technical, whatever it is, something like maybe 2 slides. And then I will organize a lunchtime, like wine and cheese. It doesn't have to be wine, but you know what I mean? To like get the ISI people out of their offices to come eat food and meet with you all. And then you guys do quick presentations, and it's super informal. So they just while they're eating their cheese or whatever, they say stuff and you can ask them questions. It's this very kind of like, we're all basically in the same building. So it's just a matter of organizing it. So, but it's ad hoc. Other than that, like, let's say you really want help, but you can't get other teams interested. Then I'm very happy to make warm introductions to anyone in the building. ISI has a directory online that you could up. And if you're like, hey, can you connect me to this person at ISI? Yeah, no problem. Whether or not it's going to turn into anything, I think that's between you and that person. But also I like to get that feedback. Like if you're having a hard time connecting to ISI people, I could obviously like help. But yeah,
Yep.
that's the nature of the ISI Tech Exchange.
Okay, helpful. And then last question for the VCs who are here are pitches. Do you have, like, for my solution, it's specific to ed tech, focusing on higher ed. So do we have VCs who are focused on that domain, or are they more generalists?
So I appreciate that question. So the nature of VC Angel office hours isn't typically to get you investment opportunities.
Right, but just the feedback, right? Like somebody who's from that
Just
vertical
somebody used
would be
to
more helpful, probably.
obviously, yes, there's that, and there is a matrix that I do each time and there's also a preferred investor form that I send out to teams so that I make sure that whoever's on the roster to participate is being matched in a way that makes sense, right? But
Okay.
that doesn't necessarily mean that you will always have investors in the VC Angel office hours that understand your industry or invest in your industry.
Yeah.
It's really just, it's kind of like when, I don't know, you get application review by like a general application reviewer that just kind of knows how to do good applications. Like it's
Yep.
like that. That's the heart of it. And again, like they're supposed to be mean to you. So it's kind of like a really, if you are trying to get investment from these people, it's a really clunky start, right? Because we're encouraging them to like really tell you what's wrong.
Right.
They grade you.
Yeah,
So
I would appreciate the candid feedback before like going to actually submitting to someone. So I think that would be a value add. So, okay, that's helpful. Thanks for answering the questions.
yeah. Okay, next, resources. The office space. You get a dedicated desk, depending on how many team members you have, each of you guys will get desks. Then there's like stuff like breakout rooms and snacks and coffee, and then like lunch on Founder Circle. So it's pretty cool in terms of in-person resources. And then virtually, we have a mentorship program called the Innovators in Residence, IIRs. They provide you office hours every week to talk with them for 30 minutes. And these are, so Julie Pentiskus is a Pasadena angel, and she's also a longtime business owner. She knows, her superpower is that she literally knows everybody and she knows the perfect person for you to talk to. Then there's Dana Aiken. She's an operations specialist. And so she's really good, especially with OKRs. She's really good to help you map out your goals in a way that are valuable, that you can basically reflect and analyze and improve upon as you are tracking towards your benchmarks. And then there's Darren Berkovitz, who is a serial startup founder. His business, his startup IPO'd a long time ago. It was like, he's a USC alum. So he's kind of one of you all, you know, he understands what it's like. He knows how to finesse and to work his magic as a founder. And so he's a really great person to just kind of talk general startup strategy with. Then we have other perks like AWS credits and their support. And warm introductions through our extended mentor network. So our Oceanside chats create kind of a library of people who have engaged with us, who have basically said, hey, I'll help you if you guys want any help, right? They aren't internal resources, but they are warm with us. So if you ever need help, that list is available to teams, and you can just say, hey, can you warm introduce me to, for instance, like J. Rose Sandoval from, he's at Sunstone. Yeah, sure. And then I'll quickly create a warm introduction email and shoot that out. So those are all little things that we do as virtual resources for you. Okay, we're coming up to the end. So what does the VSG community actually look like? So obviously we have startups, and we are also engaging with other startups in the startup ecosystem. So that's like maybe our main focus community-wise. That's where we start, right? Then we have mentors. Our mentors are like an extension of our family. They engage with us because of you. They want to get to know you all. They want to stay engaged in the general ecosystem. And so we are an access point for them. So, you know, if you are a mentor style person, or you know mentors who want to get connected, introduce them to me. I'm really happy to get them involved. Then we have students. And so students, like I said, students are a little early for us when you are a student founder, but sometimes you're just a student who like is interested in startups and you want to be involved in startups. So that's where the Summer Smasher program comes in. And by all means, participate in our Oceanside chats, learn a little something. And I'm slowly developing a access point for students who are actually looking for employment to connect with our teams, because our teams oftentimes have roles that they want to fill. And that process has been very manual. I would like to, create a system around that. Right now, it's just a Slack channel in our internal Slack. See ya, Sophia. Okay. We have a question. Tranche.
Hey, Arcelia, thanks for this meeting.
Yeah.
I had a question about the AWS credits. I
Mm.
have already used the startup credits that they give. Is the Startup Garage has some different partnership or is the same?
Where did you get them? Through USC?
No. From the AWS thing, like they have some startup.
So just directly
something.
from AWS. That's a good question. My guess is that they limit it, but we have our own separate code that's to us as a university and shared with us as a garage. And I'm pretty sure I still get emails from AWS once that code is used to verify. So my guess is that so here's my answer. We have a code that we give you.
Okay.
Does that give you more, or does it give you a remainder because maybe we give more credits than the general startup application does? I really don't know the answer to that. It's a good question. Yeah, so I'm not sure what the answer is. If you want, message me on LinkedIn, like DM me on LinkedIn and ask the question again, and then tell me exactly how many credits you got through your startup program. And then I can tell you how many we give, and I guess like arguably we can get you at least the remainder, right? Like I can probably say to AWS, the university partners, like, can you just give them the remainder? Or whatever. So, but if it's a serious question, message me on LinkedIn.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I get that, you all, because the like AWS or the Google, what is it? All that stuff is adds
That's
up.
pretty helpful. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I have got $5,000 on AWS, and that's pretty helpful. And I'm kind of exhausting it. So
yeah, you said it's 5,000.
yeah.
I feel like ours is like 10K.
Okay. So anyways,
Yeah.
I can get the remainder if I get in.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I feel like that's, to me, that's like, that makes, or maybe you can get 10K on top, right? I don't know.
That's cherry on the top of that.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, just don't forget to message me on LinkedIn.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, here are the dates. Application is due, man. It's coming up Sunday. And then the program will kick off late November. Summer Smasher, I just give you general months. Those are pretty accurate though. It's an 8-week program, so it ends in July, end of July. Yeah. And then, I would say complete your application in time, but then have patience as we review it. Our scheduled dates for interview are still being sorted out. And so if you don't hear from us right away, don't stress about that. It usually takes us some time to get through the applications and to start getting interviews. So trust me when I say this, a notification will go out at some point, whether you get to interview or we ask you to apply next round. You'll get a notification. We'll never forget to send that out. If you haven't received it, it means we're still working. And we might actually extend the application, because we oftentimes extend the application. We might not. We might get a perfect cohort in our first application. That's what we're basically after. We don't take many teams. We're looking for a good mix. So sometimes we reopen that application. Chiransh, another question?
Yeah. So roughly how many teams you interview and how many applications do you get, like in general?
Oof, that's a tough question. I feel like we probably get around 50 applications because it's a totally like in-person local pool. And that's like the first round, right? Because we open it again. Or we might. And then, you know, how many teams we interview is really based on how many applications we feel are worth interviewing. So that changes every time. Sometimes we literally interview just enough to fill the cohort because that's as many as we feel are qualified candidates. But usually we'll interview enough to feel like we're bringing in the right group.
Okay,
So
got
it's
it.
kind of,
5 to 6.
I know those aren't like solid numbers, but it's really because it's literally different every time. If we were more strict in our verticals, like if we were only taking robotics teams or something, we probably would see more patterns in the way that we do stuff. But because we're taking from the deepest type of technology to like super shallow SaaS, and we're taking teams from all these different industries, right? Like it could be like healthcare or ed tech, or it could be you know, some sort of software as a service, B2B SaaS, you know, it's all sorts of stuff. So like it's really just different every time.
Do you plan to make it diverse? Like there should be someone from healthcare, someone from edtech, or
Yeah,
it's
we
not
like
that
it.
case?
No, we like it
Oh,
that way. Yeah, we try not to have too many overlapping teams. Part of the
okay.
reason is because that diverse portfolio of teams actually helps to enhance the benefits of the founder relationships. Because then, you know, you don't get in this kind of like, what is it called? Like a wind tunnel, or like, I don't know what that's called, but like where everybody's saying the same thing, so they're all validating their own ideas. That's pretty dangerous, especially in the startup.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah. Let's go, Michael.
All right. Just a couple quick questions again. The first question, actually, the main question I wanted to ask was, I was looking through some of your the companies right now that are at the Startup Garage, and what's your policy on whether or not like my startup and another startup maybe would overlap, like
Like
kind of be
competitive?
competitors? Yeah.
Phew, you know, that's an interesting question. We've never once, in my experience, and I've been doing this for many, many years now, probably the garage as you know it is built primarily by the time that I was there. We've never had to talk about that, like in any one cohort. Maybe because yeah, I just don't have any recollection of like having a team that was already in the garage and a new team coming and being like, well, no, we don't want them. In fact, yeah, I don't know if we would even discriminate against that.
Okay.
I mean, there's obviously founder sensitivity, and I've experienced that at the garage. A lot of it has to do with resources. Like you spend a whole lot of time finding some perfect like technical support system, and then like maybe somebody else in the garage is like, hey, can I ask you a question? And now this resource that took you so long to find is like talking to another founder. Like I've had to dispel some of the concerns of really nervous founders in that way. Like no one's trying to steal your stuff, but at the end of the day, like if it's IP, like if you're like legit really worried that your stuff is way too overlapped and you can't even operate within the confines of the garage or like talk at founder circle, that obviously would be a concern to us, because that's not, you know, that's not cool for anybody. But we've just never been in that situation before.
Okay, but that wouldn't necessarily affect your application, or would it?
No, I
Okay.
think if there was like, let's say we had like 3 undeniably amazing med tech or biotech startups, and we just couldn't say no to any of them because they were so great, then maybe we would decide for that cohort to be a little med tech focused, because, you know, we just couldn't say no to any of those teams. But I think like for the most part, we really don't try to bring in a lot of teams in either the same industry, or within that same cohort. Like offsetting them might be actually super valuable, because now you have a senior cohort with more experience, and they can kind of like give advice to like the more junior cohort teams with their network connections, or their ability to find and source team members, or investor relationships. Like that's super valuable. So that to me, I think would be a value add, to have like a senior team in that same industry. I don't know.
Okay.
It's all very subjective to each cycle.
Okay. So
Not
this is like a,
objective.
yeah, okay. So if it's like an older company or anything, I guess it would be less of an impact than whether if it was like the same cohort, is what I'm understanding.
Yeah, because if you
Okay.
think about it, like accelerator programs that work within a certain like industry, they do that all the time. They take teams that are like totally working and probably have overlapping interests, and it's never been like, I don't think that there's any of there. I don't think there should be a concern, unless of course it's a concern of the founder. If the founder's concerned and they can't operate or participate, then that's an issue, right?
Okay. Okay. And that's something I assume would be asked like during the interviews if I bring it up or something.
I mean, it's not technically, it's not something that we explicitly ask. It would probably be something that would more likely come up in the day-to-day at the garage. It would probably be something that I would have to be sensitive to, that I would notice over time, and that I would have to then mediate a little bit, right? And that
Okay.
mediation doesn't necessarily mean people get kicked out of the garage. It could just mean having a sensitivity to information like IP or whatever. Everyone's people, right? So like the garage is full of people. We've had misunderstandings on Slack. Like I do so much, what is it called? I run so much interference between founders, not for any reason other than like, it's like I'm a mom and you guys are all my kids, and I have to make sure you're all happy and enjoying your time, right? But every once in a while, some founder will come knock on my door and be like, they've been booking that conference room every day this week, and like, when am I ever going to get a call? And I have to like deal with that. And it's not a big deal, because it's never personal. It's just people trying to do business.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And like my second question is just, okay, if we get like rejected or from the fall cycle, will we get like feedback on what we were missing from our application, so that when we apply a second time, we'd be able to like work on that? Or is that not something, like, could we ask you questions before we apply also? Like, can we email you?
So here's what I'll say. The feedback process for our application is weak. And it's weak because our IIRs and Dave, they have other things to do. And like, if everybody got feedback on their, I wouldn't call it rejection, it's more like encouragement to apply next cycle, then, that's a whole new responsibility. We don't typically do that. However, if you're serious about it and you email and you like are desperate or something, usually Dave will jump in and say a little something. He's done that before. I don't think he likes to, but I think he'll do it, right? Because it isn't necessarily baked into our process, is to like painstakingly go through, remember, every reason. We actually, I keep a record of all of the feedback as the team reviews each application. A lot of that is, internal conversations that probably shouldn't be shared anyways. So it's just kind of a hard thing to do, I think, which is probably why very often you don't receive it anywhere you apply, right? It's almost like a rule of thumb not to do that. Because I don't know, it's very risky and vulnerable.
Okay. But if we email you, like, we could maybe get some pointers and stuff like that.
Yeah, if like, for instance, if you really want to improve your application from the last time to this time, just schedule a time with me. I'll have an office hours with you, and I'll be able to kind of walk you through your next application and say, like, this is where, you should probably focus your attention. I've done that before, actually. Teams who've like really wanted to get a leg up on their next application will reach out, and I'll schedule time with them. That I don't mind doing.
Okay, could we do that before, like, we apply for this cycle? Do you have time, or should I just email it? Like,
I've been doing that.
Okay.
Like I did that earlier today. I mean, people schedule time, like, oh, the next slide is like booking a chat. So like you could do that without a previous application. I'm just going to give you general advice.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Dimitri. Dimitri, do you want to ask your question now really quick?
Yes. You mentioned biotech startup, which requires a lot of wet lab shared equipment like shakers, centrifuges, etc. I don't see any of this in your resources.
No, we don't. We do not offer those types of resources, wet lab. Like when I was talking about that a few slides ago, it was basically saying like, we don't provide any machinery, anything like lab space. The buildings that we're in, they don't belong to USC. They're part of Brookfield, whatever, real estate. And they have real strict rules about the office space and what's allowed. Before I started, there was like a soldering iron fire at the garage. So like now, like you can't even solder anything at the garage. Like you can't hardly do anything. What you can do is house a server, or you can bring in a prefabricated 3D printer, right? Things that aren't being manufactured or tinkered with in the space. That you can do, right? But you can't build something.
No, I'm not talking about building. I'm talking about equipment like centrifuge, like electrophoresis apparatus, like plate reader.
Yeah, all of those resources, we do not have it. You have to think of us as like a traditional office space. What we could potentially do is help you to make connections to USC resources to provide access to their machinery. But there's no promises there, right? Depending on if you want connections to other lab spaces with equipment, we can make connections to these kind of like very loose partnerships that we have. But as an incubator, we do not have or provide those things to teams.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions, y'all? It's 5:01, so I'm like tempted to just be like, leave me alone. If you don't know now, then you'll never know. But I can answer well. Okay, Michael.
Sorry for the barrage of questions, but just one more question. Do you deal with companies applying to phase 1 SBIR funding, or is that too early for your startup for the garage?
SBIR funding, you were saying? Sorry, I got a call. You were saying
yeah, phase 1 SBIR funding.
What's your question about it?
Do you guys take in companies that are still at that stage? Like, so for applying to phase 1 SBIR funding, would that be something that's too early for the Viterbi Startup Garage?
No. In fact, we just got a brand new resource to provide real support in understanding SBIR, because I do think that this is a funding avenue that a lot more teams are starting to consider. So no, like that to me. So like pre-seed basically just means that you don't really have any money yet, right? So that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an okay space to be, but you can't be like ideation or early prototype where you don't even know if you have a customer. You know what I mean? Like you have to be further along in the validation of your product. So usually you do a lot of that stuff first anyways, so that you can have a substantial phase 1 application, right? That application is going to expect you to have all that information if you intend to get funded. So yeah, it's not a bad place to start.
Okay, so for applying there, then, and we're good enough to apply to something like that, then we're good enough to apply for the Viterbi Startup Garage.
Yeah, in fact, like, I mean, I would never have a team do this, but I feel like the exercise of applying to SBIR phase 1 is actually probably pretty good for your business, just to think about it in those terms, you know. But it is a very long and, you know, time intensive, resource intensive process. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
No worries. Okay, I think we're like down to just a few people, so I'm gonna end it now. Thanks for joining, everybody, and hopefully we see some really great applications this cycle. Bye.